one thing is that, see, there was something, the first time I presented my research material, which was partly on the verge when Alice in Bodheshwar was already in production as a book, going to press as a book. So it was all that material and some new material that was building up out of a new project which was emerging out of this material. And the first time I committed to doing an exhibition, I was like, knowing myself, very irritated that I have to pick up heavy things and take them here, take them there. Why couldn't I simply just sit on a computer and write and do that job well in that sense? But putting that as a joke, what I'm also trying to say is that it was also that, you know, coming out of a context of Bombay, where you live in spaces and work in spaces, teach in spaces which have a certain sense of dimension, to entering a working studio space where your living space also becomes your work exhibition space. So there were all these things that were happening simultaneously, and very frankly, when I was working on the first, second exhibitions, very often it was like, you know, if I could just lift my studio and put it in the exhibition space, it would work, because what it was a certain kind of a mind map that was a mind map of a researcher that was opening up in a certain way, and it was reworking with my material with the certain set of research questions that I had. And in this kind of process, which I found also tiring at some point in time, I was also very happy, because a certain physical engagement with work became a certain research method for me. So to kind of produce an exhibition in a certain way, you know, for example, you take the classic architect's cabinet, which has these long pull-out drawers, 8 drawers, and convert it into some kind of a showcase cabinet, which then kind of gets read also as a certain kind of a book that opens up in many directions, or blowing up pages of a book or a manual that is probably about this size to about 100 centimeters by 75 centimeters, and dealing with that. So those were, I always kept working with all of this as a certain kind of working method as to what happens when your material blows up in scale. How do you read that material differently? And it was all constantly feeding back into my work about thinking about the city, the streets, what one understands when one talks about architecture, which was the area of work that I was doing. So for me, the engagement was that, and I kept working with that. So it was also for me a fun of working with architectural spaces. You know, to kind of, for example, take a mid-landing space and convert it into an exhibition space. Take windows along a very long corridor and convert panes in the window into exhibition panels, photograph panels, and kind of work with the shadow of a castle that is right behind that panel. So I was enjoying all these kind of aspects of working with material, which is at one level kind of a book material, which you store either on a screen or as printouts, and kind of working with spaces which were in a sense coming back to me as corridors, as reflections of larger monumental buildings, etc., etc., etc. So for me, the engagement was that, and somewhere it also became a question, like, you know, when people said that, is this a work of art? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why it is a work of art, because for me it was, I was working with this, it was very frankly, I don't know if I should go on so a little bit more. So the thing is, there was also one exhibition where I said, I can't show anything, because this material is so intimate that I can't just put it up on a wall, and that was quite a telling experience for me. Obviously the curators kind of abused and said, how can you say this, and how can you, and then I said, okay, do it, and you do it in an aggressive fashion. And there was another revelation moment of what happens when intimate material suddenly goes up as exhibition material. And a lot of the people who saw that material, partly people who knew you because you share the residency space, but partly also complete strangers, and they saw the scale of intimacy in the material. So for me, all that was kind of work with my research material, which in a sense, when you're talking of what it was doing, it was shifting my idea or helping me work with my ideas of what does research mean? What does it mean to work with narrative material, which I imagine is important research material to understand a city? Or what are the relationships between textual material and visual material? And what happens when you have a complete display only of textual material? So those were the questions that were constantly occupying and interesting me. And I never really thought that, is this a work of art or is this my research work? For me, it was my research work. And then it was like, you give me this wall and it's fine, because I need a wall and a space to work with when I want to work with something. So it was that kind of preoccupation. So I never consciously like what was the art object in that sense there? Because is it the whole combination? Is it the whole space? Because it's also very, like the first time when I did a show, they said, what do we insure? So I said, what is there to insure? There is only like printouts. And the only things I had was collected postcards out of flea markets, sorry. Collected postcards, and I said, but even if they get lost, what will the insurance money do for me? Because I lose these postcards, and some of them are very important postcards. So I did not understand some of these dealings and concepts also. At least as far as my work is concerned. In other ways, I understand.
Good to know. Yeah, but that's partly the point I was sort of hinting at when we started this particular part of the conversation. I think the fact is that different kinds of production systems are, of course, different economies. So what you're describing is a residency system, it's a process and mindset. There's a production fee. It, in some sense, as Marx would say, incarnates itself in the work, and that's that. But a gallery is a very different kind of economy, obviously. Then there is, it is a fetish object. It is a commodity fetish, not a fetish object, commodity fetish. And obviously, the rules of the game are very different. And then there is the notion of value is not the same in each of these production systems and arenas. So I think what we're also looking at now is practitioners who are making transitions among these different systems and gearing up not only to new conceptual notions of what is art or questions of practice, but also how it is, in fact, how value is set on that work when it goes out into the world. And this is a problem that I think besets many, many of us. And in some strange way has its origins in the notion of the multiple. Editions, how did they come about? How do you value work that might be available in different kinds of forms? So I'm glad that we've kind of done a survey of the contours of this debate, which now brings us very much into questions of the present. So could we now open up the floor and invite questions or observations? Rakhi? Is there a mic and possibly travel to wherever it has to travel?
Might I propose a third kind of anxiety, and that is the anxiety of the viewer. And if I could take Prajakta's recent exhibition as an example, which was the environment that you created, the smell of paint, the color of that paint, the semblance of cobwebs, the slow-moving fans, the flickering light. It was so intriguing. It was as though you were trying to create a very oppressive environment, trying to either just get rid of the audience or be trying to challenge the audience, and just testing that one person who might stay back. And I personally went back a few times just to challenge myself to just be there and to try and connect with the work and just audience reaction, audience participation in your practice.
Well, can you answer that, or could we gather 2 or 3 questions? Thank you for your question. Is that a mic in your hand, Shalini, or that's another device that is it's a bouquet. Okay, we have a question.
I would like to know also the same way, like how important is the audience or spectator, but also from when the artist exhibiting from the non-formal background, like if you are, 4 of you, I think you are not from the formal background, self-taught or from other field of art. So how important is the to communicate or have the dialogue with the artist of your inspiration, or like people whom you consider as your peer in the art field, curator or critics, like how important is that?
Prajakta, will you respond first and then this question?
Thanks for visiting the show again. I think, especially the paintings, I mean, the whole environment was well thought of, but I think the paintings, I would hope that if somebody is viewing them, should be able to almost be one with it in a way that you don't understand time and you are almost part of something. I mean, I try to do that, but it's not an expectation. I mean, it's fine if somebody doesn't get it, but it's an endeavor. So.
Respond to maybe try and link these questions. The one about how important is the viewer, and about what is your sense of the community that you're in response.
Rakhi made a point earlier about staying in a suburban part of the city and the anxiety of connecting or thinking that you're producing something that will be appreciated or that will communicate with a metro audience. But this is where you stay. And can your art be a bridge? Now, this sense of bridge, I think, is important for a lot of artists. A lot of us have always felt restrained by the fact that our audience is a gallery-going audience and that alone. An earlier generation had an ideal, they painted for an ideal audience, which was like, out there. And it was not defined, but because it was an ideal audience, it had the power to inspiring you confidence that, yes, we are painting for people. Later, this idealism, it was a good thing to put it away, but then there is now so much clarity about whom you are working for that it's rare to find someone who's still looking for bridges, while people are now working for specific audiences and do different kinds of works for different kinds of audiences. So it ties in with being a decentered self, but I don't know, I don't think I'm sympathetic to that idea. But I mean, these were just kind of thoughts. And when I have the mic, I want to put in two questions, not two questions, but to Shiv Kumar and you. To Shiv Kumar, when you mentioned that there was a point where you came from a classical art history background, and then there was a point in the 80s when art history changed, and your confrontation with that, and how, and what were the actual kind of things that you needed to kind of shift. And to Ranjit, whether he sees, we put aside a grand narrative tradition, and we are now in with a dispersed kind of understanding of the of art production, everything is multiple. So do you see most of us find it difficult to kind of connect all these things together. But are you comfortable with living in a totally dispersed kind of environment, or do you see this as a transitional phase which will somehow lead to some cohesion in the understanding of art history?